They rewrote the rules to destroy two brothers. January 1980. Nelson and William Hunt owned 200 million ounces of silver, 1/3 of America's entire supply. Silver was at $49 and climbing. The Hunts were about to become the richest men in the country. Then COMEX changed the rules overnight. New regulation. No new long positions allowed. Liquidation only. If you wanted to play, you had to be a seller. Buyers were frozen out. Then they raised margin requirements. Overnight, holding silver futures became impossibly expensive. The Hunts needed hundreds of millions in additional margin just to maintain their positions. They scrambled for loans. They sold other assets. They tried everything. It wasn't enough. March 27th, 1980. Silver Thursday. Silver crashed from $21 to 10.8 inches a single day. The Hunt brothers lost over $1 billion. They declared bankruptcy within months. But here's what nobody tells you about that story. The banks that helped crash silver, the institutions that changed the rules mid-game, they didn't just win. They learned. They learned exactly how to squeeze a market. They learned exactly when the rules get changed. And they learned exactly how to be on the right side next time. 45 years later, one of those banks owns more silver than the Hunt brothers ever did. JPMorgan. 675 million ounces, roughly 45% of the world's above-ground supply in deliverable form, accumulated quietly since 2011. 14 years of positioning, and silver just hit $59. I own physical silver. I've been buying since 2019. And I'm going to show you exactly why I added to my position last week, even at all-time highs. But more importantly, I'm going to show you what JPMorgan learned from destroying the Hunt brothers, the same lesson that might be the most valuable thing you learn this year. Because the Hunts weren't wrong about silver. They were wrong about the game. And that difference cost them everything. Let me tell you the story properly. Because when you understand what really happened in 1980, you'll understand what's happening right now. Nelson Bunker Hunt wasn't some reckless gambler. He was an oil billionaire. His father was the richest man in America at one point. Nelson looked at the world in 1979 and saw something that scared him. Inflation running at 13%, the dollar losing purchasing power every month. Nixon had closed the gold window in 1971. For the first time in American history, the dollar wasn't backed by anything real. Just paper, just promises. Nelson didn't trust promises. He wanted something real. Something that couldn't be printed. So he started buying silver. At first, it was personal insurance, but then he noticed something. Silver consumption was exceeding production. Industry needed silver for photography, electronics, medical equipment, and there wasn't enough coming out of the ground. Supply deficit, growing demand, a monetary system losing credibility. Sound familiar? Nelson and his brother William accumulated 200 million ounces, some physical, some futures contracts. They weren't hiding. They were public about their thesis. They believed silver was going to the moon. And for a while, they were right. January 1979. Silver at $6. September 1979. $16. December 1979. $34. January 17th. 1980. $49.45. That's over 700% in 1 year. The Hunts were sitting on billions in gains. They were demanding physical delivery. They wanted the actual metal, not paper promises. And that's when the Hunts discovered something terrifying. There wasn't enough silver to deliver. COMEX had sold more paper contracts than there was physical metal in the vaults. If everyone demanded delivery simultaneously, the system would collapse. The exchange would fail. Banks would take massive losses. So the banks did what banks do when they're losing. They changed the rules. January 7th, 1980. COMEX announced Silver Rule 7. No new long positions allowed. Liquidation only. If you wanted to play, you had to be a seller. Buyers were frozen out. Then they raised margin requirements. Overnight, holding silver futures became impossibly expensive. The Hunts needed hundreds of millions in additional margin just to maintain their positions. They scrambled for loans. They sold other assets. They tried everything. It wasn't enough. March 27th, 1980. Silver Thursday. Silver crashed from $21 to 10.8 inches a single day. The Hunts lost over $1 billion. They declared bankruptcy within months. Here's the part that should make you angry. The Hunts were right about everything. The supply deficit was real. The monetary debasement was real. Silver did have intrinsic value that paper money didn't. But they were playing a rigged game, and when they started winning too big, the House changed the rules. Years later, someone asked Nelson Hunt what he learned. You know what he said? $1 billion isn't what it used to be. He never blamed silver. He blamed the system, and he was right to blame it. Now let me show you what happened next, because this is where it gets really interesting. This is where the villain becomes the teacher. In 2008, JPMorgan acquired Bear Stearns during the financial crisis. Fire sale. Government arranged. Part of saving the system from complete collapse. What most people don't know is that Bear Stearns came with baggage, massive short positions in silver, huge bets that silver would go down, positions so large they would move markets. JPMorgan inherited those shorts, and for years they were stuck on the wrong side of the trade. Every time silver rose, they lost money. They were bleeding. Then something changed. In 2010, JPMorgan settled manipulation charges with regulators, paid about $200 million, cost of doing business. But right around that time, market observers noticed something strange. JPMorgan stopped adding to their short positions. Then they started covering. Then they started going long. Not a little long, massively long. Since 2011, JPMorgan has accumulated approximately 675 million ounces of physical silver. That's more than the Hunt brothers ever held, more than Berkshire Hathaway ever held, more than most countries hold. They currently sit on roughly 169 million ounces in COMEX vaults alone. That's about 40% of total COMEX inventories. Think about what that means. The bank that helped destroy the Hunt brothers, that benefited from the rule changes, that paid fines for manipulation, is now positioned exactly like the Hunts were, except bigger, much bigger. And unlike the Hunts, JPMorgan helps write the rules. The Hunts were outsiders fighting the system. JPMorgan IS the system. This is the lesson that cost Nelson Hunt everything, and it's the lesson that might make you money. It doesn't matter if you're right about the fundamentals. It matters if you're on the right side of the rules. The Hunts were right and got crushed. JPMorgan was wrong, flipped, and is now positioned to win. The question is, which side are you on? Let me show you the current setup, because the parallels to 1,980 are striking, almost eerily so. Silver just hit $59, all-time high, up roughly 98% this year, the strongest annual performance since, you guessed it, 1,980. Supply deficit in the physical market. 7th consecutive year of more silver consumed than mined. That's 2.1 billion ounces drawn from stockpiles that took centuries to accumulate. Industrial demand now represents about 59% of total consumption, up from 40% a decade ago. And that number keeps climbing. Let me put this in perspective. In 1980, silver was mostly monetary and jewelry demand. Photography used some. Electronics used a little. Today, silver is in everything. Solar panels. Every gigawatt of solar capacity needs roughly 1 million ounces of silver for the conductive paste. China alone installed 250 gigawatts last year. That's 250 million ounces just for Chinese solar panels. Electric vehicles. Twice the silver of a traditional car. And EV production is doubling every few years. 5G infrastructure. AI data centers. Medical equipment. Military applications. The modern world literally cannot function without silver. And we're using more than we're mining. Every single year, for 7 years straight. Where's the extra silver coming from? Stockpiles, vaults, reserves. They're being drained. COMEX registered silver, that's the metal actually available for delivery, has been dropping steadily, down from 150 million ounces to around 113 million. Lease rates, that's what people pay to borrow silver for short periods, hit 30% annualized in October. Normal lease rates are 1 to 2%. 30% means people are desperate. That's not normal market behavior. That's what a squeeze forming looks like. And here's where it gets interesting. November 28th, 2025. COMEX went down. Server cooling issue, they said. The outage lasted over 10 hours. During that outage, silver spiked to 56.72. When systems came back online, bid-ask spreads were over $1. That's what illiquidity looks like. That's what a paper market under stress looks like. Days later, JPMorgan reclassified 134 million ounces from registered to eligible status. Let me explain why that matters. Registered silver can be delivered against futures contracts. Eligible silver is just stored. It's not available for delivery. JPMorgan effectively pulled 9% of deliverable silver off the market during peak demand. They're not selling, they're removing supply. The Hunts tried to squeeze silver by buying everything. JPMorgan might be squeezing silver by simply not selling what they already own. Same outcome, different method, learned from the masters. Now, here's the part most people don't want to hear. The bear case. The strongest argument against everything I just said. The biggest argument against silver is that it's been manipulated for 45 years. Why would that ever stop? Banks have been playing paper games since the Hunts got crushed. Why would they suddenly lose control now? It's a fair question. The best question a skeptic could ask. Let me address it directly. Manipulation requires excess supply. When vaults are full, paper games work beautifully. Banks can sell futures contracts they never intend to deliver because why would they need to? Nobody demands delivery anyway. Everyone settles in cash. The paper price becomes the price. The game continues indefinitely. But what happens when vaults empty? What happens when industrial users actually need the metal? Ford needs silver for vehicle electronics. Tesla needs silver for batteries and solar products. Samsung needs silver for every chip and phone they manufacture. Every solar panel company on Earth needs silver paste, or they don't have a product. These aren't speculators. These aren't traders who'll settle for cash if delivery fails. These are manufacturers who need physical atoms of silver or their production lines stop. Period. No negotiation. When industrial users start standing for delivery, when they refuse cash settlement because they literally need the metal, paper games break. That's the scenario that concerns me. Not because silver price is going up, because the paper market is showing stress fractures. And the institution that knows this game better than anyone on Earth is positioned for exactly that scenario. Now, let me be honest about what could go wrong. New mining supply could come online. Industrial demand could collapse in recession. Another institution could dump physical silver onto market. Governments could intervene in ways we can't predict. These are real risks. I own silver anyway. Here's why. The Hunts were right about the fundamentals in 1980, wrong about the game, wrong about timing, wrong about using leverage that could be called in. But adjusted for inflation, their $49 peak equals about $170 today. We're at $59. If silver simply returns to its inflation-adjusted high, not higher, just equal, that's nearly 3x from here. Let me do the math for you. If you bought 100 ounces today at $59, that's $5,900. If silver returns to its inflation-adjusted 1,980 high of $170, that same 100 ounces is worth $17,000. And I'd argue the fundamental case is stronger now than in 1980. Industrial demand? Higher. Much higher. The Hunts couldn't have imagined solar panels and EVs. Supply deficit? Larger. 7 consecutive years versus a few quarters in the late 70 seconds. Paper market leverage? Exponentially larger. Open interest at 244% of vaulted silver. That ratio was never this extreme in 1980. I'm not predicting 170. I'm not predicting any specific number. I'm saying the math isn't crazy, the historical precedent exists, and the smart money, the money that destroyed the Hunts and learned from it, is positioned for exactly this scenario. They're not betting on silver going to 170. They're betting on the paper market breaking. And when paper breaks, physical wins. Every single time throughout history, here's what I'm actually doing. I own physical silver, coins and bars in my possession, not ETFs, not mining stocks, actual metal I can hold. I started buying in 2019 when I first noticed these patterns. I've added at $18, at $24, at $30, and yes, at $59 last week. I'm not trading. I'm accumulating. Because if this thesis is right, the difference between $50 and $59 entry doesn't matter when silver is at 100 or 150 or higher. And if I'm wrong, I own real metal that's been money for 5,000 years. There are worse things to hold during uncertain times. Here's what you should consider. If you believe paper markets face stress, if you believe supply deficits matter, if you believe JPMorgan knows something you don't, then some silver exposure makes sense. Physical metal is still available right now. Premiums are elevated but not insane. You can get American Eagles for about $5 to $8 over spot. Canadian maples slightly less. Bars even cheaper per ounce. That window might not last. Remember what happened in 2020? COVID panic hit, paper silver crashed to $12. But try buying physical. Dealers were charging $45. That's nearly a 300% premium over spot. Month-long wait lists. Some dealers simply stopped taking orders. When paper and physical diverge, when everyone wants real metal at once, premiums explode. We could see that again, maybe worse. If you're skeptical, I understand. Watch the signals instead of committing capital. Watch COMEX registered inventories. When they drop below 50 million ounces, stress becomes critical. They're at around 113 million now. At current drain rates, 6 to 12 months, maybe sooner if there's a rush. Watch lease rates. Normal is 1 to 2%. We hit 30% in October. That's desperation borrowing. Watch what institutions do, not what they say. JPMorgan isn't giving interviews about silver. They're quietly accumulating. Actions speak louder than analyst reports. The Hunts couldn't watch these signals in real time. The data wasn't publicly available in 1979. You have an advantage they never had. Use it. My neighbor thinks I'm crazy for buying silver at all-time highs. He said the same thing when I bought at 24, and at 30, and at 48. He might be right eventually, but so far he's watched from the sidelines while I've doubled my position. The Hunt brothers weren't crazy. They were early, and they played the wrong game. JPMorgan wasn't smart in 1980. They were just on the right side of the rules. Now JPMorgan is positioned like the Hunts, except they help write the rules. The question isn't whether silver goes up. The question is whether you're positioned before the next rule change. Because in this game, rules can change overnight. And when they do, it's too late to position. Now I want to hear from you. If you had known the Hunts playbook in 1979, if you had known the rules would change, what would you have done differently? Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one, and if this analysis made sense, I put together a Hunt brothers case study. What they did right, what killed them, and how to avoid their mistakes in 2025. Link in the description. No affiliate links, just the history and the lessons. Hit subscribe right now, because the silver situation is unfolding in real time. COMEX inventories are dropping, lease rates are spiking, industrial demand is non-negotiable, and the bank that crushed the last silver squeeze is positioned for the next one. When the rules change this time, and they always change eventually, you'll want to know before everyone else does. The Hunts were right about silver, they were wrong about the game. Don't make their mistake. Here's what I think about every time I look at my silver stack. The Hunt brothers saw the same fundamentals we see now. Inflation eroding purchasing power. Currency backed by nothing but promises. Supply deficits in a critical metal. They saw it clearly. They were absolutely right about the thesis. They just forgot one thing. In a rigged game, being right isn't enough. You have to survive long enough for right to matter. They used leverage that could be called in. They fought against the rule makers instead of positioning alongside them. They were loud when they should have been quiet. They were aggressive when they should have been patient. JPMorgan learned all of those lessons by watching the Hunts lose. No leverage that can be called in. They own physical outright. No fighting the rule makers. They help write the rules. No loud public thesis. 14 years of quiet accumulation. No aggressive squeeze. Just patient positioning and waiting for the market to do the work. The Hunts were right and lost everything. JPMorgan is positioned to be right and win. That's the difference between understanding markets and understanding the game. I'm not JPMorgan. I can't write the rules. But I can position alongside those who do. I can hold physical metal that can't be margin called. I can be patient when others panic. I can learn from history instead of repeating it. And I can share what I've learned with you, so you don't have to make the same mistakes. I'll see you in the next one.